Award-winning producer Matt Ross Spang about these newly mixed versions of some Elvis classics and why his legacy remains steadfast almost 50 years later. That's on the Next World Cafe.
Saturday afternoon at 1 on WAER.
You're listening to 88.3 FM, WAER Syracuse, your local NPR station from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University.
SportsNite, your home for all SU sports talk.
Syracuse out, they turn around and try to jump up and grab the ball. That's not rebounding. That's not boxing out. That's lazy. It is nowhere close to an overreaction to say that they can go 500 or better in ACC play.
I think there's something to be said about that specific phenomenon. 5 guys saying there's no backup plan. It's just us.
Breaking down everything from around the hill.
When you get doubled up on your shots and even one more to put a cherry on top, there's no possible way you can win a lacrosse game.
You can tell it just dissipates out of nowhere. And it's the in-game adjustments that have hurt Syracuse.
And giving hot takes along the way.
Naheem Cloud, they want him to be Jesse Edwards, and he just isn't.
Fran Brown is a home run hire for Syracuse.
Get your voice heard by calling in at 315-443-2011 or interact with us on social media at WAER Sports Talk. It's Sports Night, and it starts right now.
Welcome in to Sports Night, everyone, here on WAER. We're on the air from 8 to 9. Skylar Wilkes alongside Jish Sokolsky. We're previewing the football game tomorrow taking place on the Hill between Syracuse and the 23rd ranked Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. That game's at noon. But we're on a little bit early on the WAER airwaves. If you want to join the conversation, call in 315-443-2011. You can text us at 315-556-3929, or you can tune in on YouTube, WAER Sports Talk, to see the faces of both Jish and I. Please call in. Please interact with us. We've got a lot to talk about, a lot of expectations for this Syracuse football team, Jish. Week 1 was a success, more or less, for the Orange, a win over Ohio, but it didn't start off that way.
Mm-hmm. Well, it didn't start off that way on offense or defense. I specifically on offense, you look at that first drive from Kyle McCord, anyone could look at his box score and say, this guy had a great day. But you look at that first drive, 2 dropped interceptions. I mean, that's kind of the opposite of the advertised Kyle McCord that we got. When he came to Syracuse, everyone's talking, he's not necessarily going to push the ball down the field. He's not going to make your team better, but he's just a solid quarterback. He looked like a gunslinger on that first drive, trying to fit it into tight windows, and it didn't really work out there, but he definitely improved as the game got on.
And you have to think about, first drive out there with his new team, jitters, a packed dome, feeling the pressure. He's played in a lot of big games. He's played in the Big House. He's played at the Horseshoe. He's played in Michigan and Ohio State, the most anticipated rivalry in college football. He's experienced, but it seemed like he was forcing too much. That seam down the middle to Gadsden, the second almost interception. He forced that ball trying to get it to his star tight end and nearly paid for it.
Right. It almost seemed like he was underestimating the defense, Skylar, right? Your week 1 opponent, it's not Ohio State. You're not just going to blow out your week 1 opponent. Ohio is a very formidable opponent. I think just from the look of it, from the decisions he was making, trying to fit it over linebackers to the sideline to nearly picked off balls, like it almost seemed like he thought he was playing, like a Colgate or something.
What's interesting, Ohio last year, 6th in the country in total defense. That Bobcats team can really play, and the defense got off to a slow start. Ohio went down the field, got a field goal. It was kind of a bend, don't break from Ohio State, but obviously Kyle McCord, that's the biggest thing, right, is he's the centerpiece of this offense. He's the biggest name transfer, if you will, that they brought in, and to have a slow start, it definitely wasn't probably what he anticipated, but it's something that you want to avoid, and I'm sure McCord, you're about to hear in a second, that he wasn't a big fan of that start either.
would have liked to start out and go and drive down the field and score, but when that's not the case, I think you just have to have trust in your preparation and knowing that it's a long game. And then they feel like we started to get things rolling a little bit there in the first half, but like I said, I feel like that's one of the perks of playing a lot of football at this point.
Yeah, I mean, they really did get it rolling. It was just like, okay, first drive jitters are gone, and now he really stepped up. He started firing with with great accuracy and making smart decisions, even with pressure in his face. Looked so calm and composed. It was like something we've never seen before, or at least in recent years at Syracuse.
The one thing I really enjoyed about Kyle McCord's game against Ohio, he had NFL-level timing. The way he got the ball out, three-step drop, get that ball away. He trusted the scheme, his offensive coordinator. He was sharing the wealth. He knew exactly where he wanted to attack every single time he dropped back. I mean, we saw it in the opening drive. It kind of it didn't pay dividends, but as the game progressed, his reads were getting open. He was attacking them decisively, didn't give the defense, the safeties, time to rotate over, especially on the Gadsden touchdown, where Ohio did send a blitz. Gadsden wide open down the seam. McCord was so decisive there. Kind of made up for, as we were kind of talking about before the show, some Syracuse signature blocking on that play. His timing was impeccable.
I think both touchdowns to Trevor Pena, but especially the first one I was like, holy cow. That throw, it was pinpoint accuracy. He was from the opposite hash. He was on the other hash, the far hash, threw it just over the near pylon and put it on the money to Pena.
You can't do that at Madden. You can't do that in NCAA 25. He did basically the impossible. This is what we wanted to see from Kyle McCord the entire time. We wanted this pocket passer who makes the tough throws and makes the right decisions. And I think that McCord almost bailed out his offensive line just a little bit. I think
I think he bailed them out entirely.
I think they played a lot better than in years past. I think that McCord...
Well, that's not saying much.
Of course. But McCord made them look well by getting rid of that football and putting it in places where really only his receivers could get. I think to that LaQuinn Allen touchdown, too. Right outside, a one-handed grab, a tough grab for Allen, but there was no way a defender was making a play on that. It was impeccable ball placement, impeccable timing. McCord looked like the real deal if you shake off that first drive.
And that's also like the interception. Now he's got an interception to his toe. That's what made you kind of frustrated when he threw that because there was no need, right? They were up big. It was late, and he just kind of heaved it down the field trying to go deep to Umari Hatcher, who was draped in coverage. And,
right.
Now he gets an interception on his mark, which, it's one deal. 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. That's not that bad, but you hate to see that kind of mark on his record after such a great day.
You wonder if it was him trying to get some get back. On that drive, he had a huge completion to Aronde Gadsden that was taken back with a penalty. I don't know. Maybe there's a little frustration. Try to push that ball, show that we're still going to move the ball, still going to move it downfield, but definitely an avoidable mistake, but one that ended up didn't really doing much for, Syracuse or Ohio when the dust cleared.
We are talking Syracuse football, specifically the Ohio recap from last game here on SportsNite. Skylar Wilkes with Jish Sokolsky. Call in 315-443-2011 or text us 315-556-3929. Can't forget to interact with us on social media, on X specifically at WAER Sports Talk. You can watch us on YouTube as well at WAER Sports Talk. A big part of McCord's success, was, like you said, Jish, sharing the wealth. And a lot of guys got involved. 3 different players caught touchdowns, a lot of different catches. Trevor Pena, potentially an unfamiliar name for some people maybe just joining the Syracuse show. If you watch a lot of special teams, you might know him from one of the premier punt returners in the game. But offensively, he looked like an entirely different player. Jeff Nixon, it wasn't just kind of luck. He was really almost scheming up these plays for Pena.
Skylar, maybe we should have listened to Fran Brown all offseason when he was saying, hey, Trevor Pena's in our wide receiver room. Hey, you hear about this guy, Trevor Pena? Fran Brown was hinting at it all summer, right? This is a guy that was clearly building up hype ever since last season, when he was dealing with the injuries. Coach Dino Babers wanted to put him on the field, and for good reason. We saw it in this game. 3 touchdowns, 2 by air, 1 by the ground. He was a versatile weapon, but what I mainly saw from him was he was being used as a traditional slot receiver, while in past offensive schemes with the Robert and I scheme, with schemes before that, he was kind of used as maybe the end-around gadget kind of guy.
He was gimmicky, yeah.
He was a little gimmicky, but when you bring in an NFL offensive coordinator like Jeff Nixon into the fold, all right, you're the slot receiver, attack the seam, run quick outs, attack the sideline. That's what Trevor Pena was asked to do, almost akin to, I don't want to compare him to Malik Neighbors, but what Malik Neighbors was doing last year at LSU, kind of being that do-it-all guy from the slot, that's how they tried to use Trevor Pena, and that's how he was so successful.
I think a great little nugget to this Trevor Pena story is that he was recruited to Temple by Fran Brown, committed to the Owls.
Fran Brown recruited someone?
Right?
Who would
have thought? He recruited him to Temple. He was committed to Temple, ended up flipping to Syracuse, and now here he is at least 5-6 years later playing for Fran Brown, and first game out, he had never scored an offensive touchdown before. He had only had points on special teams, and to come out, like we talked about, 2 receiving touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, first since 2021. First time he found the end zone since 2021. Played in just 1 game last year. And, man, to see the, not just potential, but like to know that Pena could theoretically have been doing this the whole time, got to be frustrating for Syracuse fans, but also real excited that he's healthy now and already making an impact.
Trevor Pena now finally has the production, at least in this 1 game, to back up the talent that we all kind of saw from him. We saw it on his punt returns. As you said, he's a shifty kind of guy who could break a tackle just by dancing around a little bit. Now we get to see, okay, you've got 3 touchdowns in 1 game. You're putting the nation on notice. But I wonder how much of that is Trevor Pena using all of his skills, or if it is the scheme. Like, who's to say if you didn't put maybe a Zeed Haynes in the slot, if you didn't put maybe a Jackson Meeks who played exclusively on the outside in the slot, heck, if you put an Emmanuel Ross in the slot, could they not do what Trevor Pena did? Because a lot of his production came from seams, right down the middle. It doesn't... don't get me wrong. A lot of talent...
There were a few slants in there as well, but you're right. It wasn't... They weren't necessarily diversifying his route tree. It was like seams and then kind of slants is really all they were doing.
At the end of the day, you have to make the play, and Trevor Pena made those plays. The over-the-shoulder catch in the for the touchdown, great stuff. That 20-yard completion down the middle, you have to make that catch. They're not easy catches to make, but who's to say if you don't put another Syracuse wide receiver there that they can get a 3-touchdown game? You know, I think that Trevor Pena now from here on can be used as your number 1 option, or he could be used as a decoy. Teams see, okay, Trevor Pena, he's the number 1 receiver in this offense. You can switch it up by changing up roles, I think.
And that's the positive signs of seeing how much distribution was given by Kyle McCord, different weapons he was throwing to. Right, Oronde Gadsden, obviously the big name, you're going to go to him. But now our attention's on Gadsden. Pena now emerges. Oh no, we have to keep our attention on him. But then that would open up opportunities for Zeed Haynes, for Jackson Meeks, Emmanuel Ross, you mentioned, a lot of different weapons. The receiving room is so deep, unlike we've really seen in recent years, that it just gives Jeff Nixon, Kyle McCord so many options. There's only so many guys that you can guard, and you have to also take into account LaQuinn Allen is so good in the passing game.
Right.
His pass catching abilities are second to none, at least in the ACC. So you have all these weapons. How can you guard all of them?
You really can't. Let me throw out a number for you, Skylar. 4 different receivers for Syracuse had 4 catches or more. You know the last time they had that?
When?
2019, Western Michigan was the last time that happened. We're talking Tristan Jackson was the last time that Syracuse...
So another MAC team.
Another MAC team, and a team that Syracuse beat by 20-some-odd points that day. This is a rare feat from the Syracuse offense. It's a testament not just to Trevor Pena, to the talent on the team, but I really think this conversation has to be centered around Jeff Nixon as well.
And real testament to Trevor Pena, who's worked his way back from injury, and it comes from a real change in his lifestyle, which you talked about.
Focus on staying in the training room and take care of my body. Just doing all the little things off the field, eating the right things, drinking enough water, and getting enough sleep. Just all the little things, just making sure that I'm the best I am every day.
And Syracuse could really use the best Trevor Pena at all times. I mean, now he's been weaned off the special teams, so you take away that threat. But just his continued presence in the offense, giving defenses something else to worry about outside of Gadsden and Allen, is so major for this offense and the potential that he can also take the top off a defense, right? Like he has Zede Haynes, kind of known as the burner, but Pena has elite speed as well. And there's so many options to give Kyle McCord and so much pressure to put on a defense.
I like what you're saying about the speed of the Syracuse receivers, because so many of them can just run down the sideline, run down the middle, catch a ball over their shoulder, make a play. You now have to find the guys who can run over the middle, and we did see that with Trevor Pena. Aranda Gadsden can't be your only threat over the middle. That's how Syracuse kind of last season, that's how their passing attack basically died, because once Aranda Gadsden went down, Trevor Pena was basically a non-starter last year. All they really had were those deep ball receivers down the sideline. The fact that they have now guys in the slot like Trevor Pena, like maybe a Zede Haynes, I still believe that you put him in the slot, he's got shiftiness, and we've really yet to even see the best of Zede Haynes. You put those guys in the slot, there's threats over the middle for the Syracuse Orange.
A lot of weapons on the Syracuse offense, which we saw last week against Ohio. Here on SportsNite, Skylar Wilkes, Jish Sokolsky breaking down the Orange's victory over the Bobcats. You can join the conversation. Call in 315-443-2011 or text us 315-556-3929. And Jish, we're about to put the bow on the Ohio-Syracuse Week 1 affair. I want to play a little game. 2 truths and a lie.
Oh, I know this one.
So 2 things that are true from Week 1 and 1 thing that is overblown.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll start with you, kind of list your things, and let's see where it takes us.
Okay. All right, so you're going to have to guess which one I think is overblown. Okay. Kyle McCord is the best quarterback talent-wise that SU has had since Ryan Nassib, the last quarterback that they sent to the NFL, if you don't count Tommy DeVito.
2 Giants legends, though.
Hey, what do you know? Backup quarterbacks. Syracuse's run defense, it's going to be fine. It'll be fine. It was a bad day, but they're going to be fine. And Fadil Diggs is all he was billed up to be.
A lot of really good options there.
Mm-hmm.
So Kyle McCord, let's restate them. Kyle McCord is the best quarterback
talent-wise since Ryan Nassib that SU's ever seen, or has seen since then.
And then the second one?
Syracuse run defense is going to be fine. The third one is Fadil Diggs, all he was built up to be.
I'm going to go with the second one, is the lie.
That's correct. I don't think Syracuse's run defense will be fine. And the reason I don't think it's going to be fine is not just because Ohio gashed them on the ground. Tyus had over 200 yards. It's because they were getting there, but they just simply couldn't tackle. You have to worry about maybe the personnel, right? When you have Tank Wilson being backed up 8 yards on first down, second down, he's supposed to be your big run-stuffing D-tackle. There's going to be some issues with personnel, and there has to be a better shuffle going on.
And now you take Marlo Wax out of the equation for the next 6 weeks.
Exactly.
So you have to fill his spot with whether it's James Hurd or it's Anwar Sparrow.
And those guys are undersized. Those guys are sub 230 pounds. I don't know if Syracuse has the personnel right now to be able to consistently stop the run against some tough ACC opponents coming up, especially Georgia Tech. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But you get hats to the ball, that's a good sign, but you have to be able to finish the job. And the secondary, they took some pretty bad pursuit angles. I'm just super skeptical that this is going to be an issue that you can just plug up with 1 week of practice.
And that interior defensive line, right? Like Braylon Ingram is gone for the year. Isaiah Hastings, the Missouri transfer, didn't perform, I guess, to what you would like him to. So that interior defensive line needs to step up, right? Kevon Darden is out in Tucson with Dino Babers. So you really need some other big-time players. You executed well in the transfer portal. You got names from good schools, and they need to execute and play defense in there because you can't have consistent 200-yard performances out of running backs.
Yeah. You could blame the 3-3-5 in years past. This year, they've opted away from the 3-3-5, and the rush defense isn't looking too great. So it's something that I'm going to be monitoring all season long, and I hope that I'm wrong about this for the sake of Syracuse football. But if I'm not, don't say I didn't tell you so. So, Skylar, what are your 2 truths and a lie?
All right. So mine, I think, are probably a little more obvious than yours.
Okay.
So my first one is LaQuinn Allen is legit.
Obviously.
this team can go as far as the offense takes it.
Okay.
And the offensive line is going to be the team's downfall.
I got to say that last one's a lie. It could be the downfall, but I just didn't see it in Ohio's game because Kyle McCord was kind of making up for them.
You are right. That is the lie, but I am very concerned.
Oh, of course.
About this offensive line.
Would it really be Syracuse football if you weren't concerned a little bit about the offensive line?
No, it probably wouldn't be, but you add some transfers. You have the 2 tackles in there with Washington and
Big Spoon.
Yeah, with Washington and Weatherspoon. Of course, how can I forget Demetrius Weatherspoon anchoring down that left tackle? But that Arondé Gadsden touchdown, Savion Washington, it was a corner blitz coming from the right side, and he got almost Euro-stepped. And if Kyle McCord didn't get the ball out so quickly, I mean, that was a clear sack. He, not known for his mobility, he had to make a lot of plays happen with his feet. Was calm under pressure, but only got sacked once, but was hurried quite a bit. That Ohio team did a really nice job getting pressure. I was impressed with what I saw from John Ray Reed at center in the middle of the offense, but the rest of the offensive line, especially those 2 transfer tackles, they concern me quite a bit.
I think that you get big guys at the position that doesn't necessarily translate to being the most skillful, tactful football players. I do think Kyle McCord does kind of put a mask on that. Syracuse fans aren't talking about the offensive line now, but they could be a lot later if defenses start taking away Kyle McCord's first read and make him go through his progressions a little bit more, make him scramble a little bit, because we saw Kyle McCord try to scramble once. Wasn't the prettiest thing in the world. So if defenses start taking away the first read from Kyle McCord, you have to really trust that offensive line. And you're right, Skylar. I just don't know if we've seen enough to say, okay, the offensive line is good. It's fixed. Kyle McCord's going to be a statue all season long.
And you hope that it doesn't catch up to him, right? Like, he was able to escape pressure and make plays happen against Ohio. But could it happen against Georgia Tech? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. The trenches going to play a big factor against the Yellow Jackets. And speaking of Georgia Tech, our reporter Austin Barrick joins us to talk all about Yellow Jackets and Orange coming up. So stay with us here on SportsNite.
88.3.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Sports Night on WAER. I'm Jish Sokolsky, joined by Skylar Wilkes and our reporter for tomorrow's game versus Georgia Tech. Welcome aboard, Austin Barrick. If you got any questions for Austin or something you want to get off your chest ahead of tomorrow's game, now is the time to get your voice heard. Call us at 315-443-2011, or you can text us 315-556-3929, or of course you can interact with us on Twitter at WAER Sports Talk or in our live chat right here on YouTube. A first time ever for WAER, of course. For the first time, they had to put the three most handsome gentlemen on the show, of course. But
speak for yourself.
Austin, you're going to be at the game tomorrow. Number 23, Georgia Tech versus Syracuse. The first time Georgia Tech's been ranked since September 2015. A really big step in the Brent Key era, 100%.
Yeah, this is going to be an electrifying game. Before I get into my spiel here, I do want to shout out Jordan Leonard for making this whole streaming thing possible. What we're witnessing right now, folks, is history in the WAER Sports Talk department. This has not been done before. The cameras look great. This is great stuff. So this has basically been his baby. It's awesome to see this come to fruition. That's why they pay him the big bucks around here. But this game is awesome, right? This reminds me of 2022 when NC State came to the Dome, and then on the flip side when Florida State came to the Dome, and it was 38-3, right? Those are the last times that a ranked team has come here, and there's a lot of excitement. And I'm a storylines guy. The instant thing that came to mind for me when I saw the schedule come out, second game of the season, Dino Babers was fired at the conclusion, basically, of losing at Georgia Tech last year in the second to last regular season game. There's a lot of storylines. There's a lot of buzz, pun intended, about who's going to win this game. This is basically like the watershed moment, right? You walk through the right door, you walk through the left door, depending on if Syracuse wins or loses this football game. It could be a very promising season if they win. And if they lose tomorrow, all this offseason hope really takes a step back.
It's a huge reality check for whichever team loses tomorrow.
I think it's funny because no one really expected Georgia Tech to, be where they are right now at top 25 team in the country, beat Florida State in Ireland to start the season. Everyone was kind of thinking, okay, it's an early season ACC matchup, but weren't really thinking too much of it. But now this game has become really important.
It has, and obviously, the Dublin game mattered a lot, and that was a game where I think a lot of people were like, Georgia Tech could make this a game. Florida State, and what I've always thought about the preseason AP rankings, it's groupthink. People don't really know how good these teams are. Everything's on paper. There's no preseason games in college football, as we know, as you guys know. So they went out there, and they were the better team. Right? There was no fluke that Tech beat Florida State. And a lot has been made of this run game that they have. And I'm sure we're going to get into that soon. But they're a good team. I do think they're being slightly overrated, though. Georgia Tech is. And, there's some reasons why, but...
So what are the reasons?
Well, so they beat Florida State, and Florida State had a 10 next to their name. Mm-hmm. And the way that they went about winning that game with a last-second field goal, a lot of buzz. And then they go in and, they crushed their opponent last week, Georgia State, 28-3. Now, what the numbers won't tell you, what the national media won't tell you, Skylar and Jish, is that they were pretty bad on defense in that game, especially through the air. Like, they let up some big-time explosive plays to Georgia State last week. And, I don't know, Kyle McCord only had 354 passing yards last week. But all I've heard this week is, oh my gosh, the Georgia Tech running offense versus the Syracuse run defense. It's basically like a varsity football team versus a JV football team is how it's been described to me this entire week. It's unbelievable, the disrespect that the Syracuse defense
I don't know if it's super disrespectful, right? You got a team led by Jamal Haynes, by Haynes King. These are two guys that basically sent Dino Babers back to being an offensive coordinator. They each had 82 yards the last time they played. Yes. And this season, it looks like, on the ground, I should say, in this season, Syracuse, in their little sample size, showing they're not much better at defending the run. I mean, I think we can all agree that the most glaring issue for SU was its run defense in that Ohio game, but I think Coach Fran is a man with a plan, and that game plan to stop Georgia Tech's potent rushing attack, it's pretty simple.
We just got to be more physical. And then we're playing against Georgia Tech, who's going to show you need to be more physical. Because they're physical. We just got to be more physical. We ain't going to really change anything, be more physical, and just come up and tackle.
I wonder if they got to be more physical.
You think he wants them to be a little bit more physical?
You can't coach physicality. That's not like something you know.
Well,
you don't,
apparently he thinks that he can.
I don't. I would like to see him do that because it's not like you don't do right. Like you can scheme and coach to a scheme and a play, right? You run mock plays on the other team with scout offense, but you can't be like, Derek, I want you to hit this guy hard. You could say it, but that doesn't mean that guys are actually going to do it. So, he's saying it, but there's no real true way to implement it, so it doesn't really mean anything.
It's definitely a strange juxtaposition when you look at this matchup from this year and last year. Last year, Syracuse came in as, oh my God, how do you stop this team on the ground? They just ran for 400-some-odd yards against Pittsburgh, and then Georgia Tech's run defense was very bad last year. Very, very bad. Towards the bottom of the country. I think it was bottom 5 in the nation last year.
And yet it didn't matter.
And now on the flip side this year, Georgia Tech comes to the Dome, potent rushing attack. Syracuse has some questions marked there, but the question is, does Syracuse have the personnel and offensive firepower, like you were saying, Austin, to kind of combat some of their weaknesses and put lipstick on a pig, if you will?
Yeah, they do. I believe in the offense, and I was listening to you guys and your Two Truths and a Lie. Great segment idea from producer Andrew Del Piana. It's an offense that I really believe in, and I don't really care about that slow start first drive that McCord had. I don't really care that he almost threw 2 interceptions. It's first game nerves, new school, all this buzz. Of course you're going to be nervous, all right? I flushed that out. It's a mulligan if you're playing golf, right? It's just a bad first inning if you're a starting pitcher like Chris Sale. Of course he's going to get roughed up from time to time. It's a small sample size, just like the one game, because Anthony Tyus rushed for 200 yards. That guy played at Northwestern. That guy's got NFL strength, okay? You got to flush it. You can, we live in this world where everything is an overreaction off of 1 week, all right? I choose to believe that teams can improve. I choose to believe that, when you play against yourself, all of fall camp or summer camp, whatever you want to call it, that your week 1 might look a little rusty. And I choose to believe that they'll be better. Now, the Georgia Tech offense, the running game is legit. But to your point, Syracuse's offense is just as good, if not better. I believe Kyle McCord is better than Haynes King. I believe that through the air, he's a much better passer. He's proven that with the passing yards, the volume. The weapons are really good. We've been talking about Pena all week and how much of a surprise he was, but kind of not a surprise based off the quotes in the offseason. And then Haynes is also, there's a lot of options. And around the Gadsden, people aren't talking, it's all this running attack from Georgia Tech. Gadsden is still the best offensive player on both sides of the ball.
So I got to ask you, do you think that this game is going to be more of a offensive shootout than a one-sided affair? And I'd also like to know I'd love to know what the audience at home believes as well. You can call into the show. If you think this is going to be an offensive shootout, please let us know. 315-443-2011. Or you can text us 315-556-3929, Or, of course, you can interact with us on our social media on Twitter at WAER Sports Talk or in our YouTube live chat. I personally think that Syracuse needs to get the ball out of Georgia Tech's hands. If Georgia Tech can hold onto the ball, if it does become a shootout, that favors Syracuse because their passing offense is miles better than Georgia Tech's. If Georgia Tech can hold onto the football, it won't be. But if Syracuse can be aggressive and snatch possessions away, then they can go into a shootout kind of scenario, and that's one that suits Syracuse much better.
The over-under is at 60.5, right?
Ooh.
So they're expecting, kind of a 30-30, basically, 31-28 Georgia Tech is going to win, I guess, is if you read into the spread, because Tech is favored by 3, which, again, it's like a home dog, and you look pretty good week 1. That's just an interesting recipe to me, also as a
I think the thought is they didn't look that good. Sure, there was promising, but you struggled somewhat against a MAC team, which is why I think, and Georgia Tech, didn't struggle as much against the non-Power 5 team from last week. But Austin, I wanted to bring it back to a point. Mulligan, okay, right, scrape the Ohio game. If Georgia Tech runs all over Syracuse again, are you concerned, or is it just because you can live with it because it's a talented Georgia Tech rushing attack?
It becomes a concern. I subscribe to the theory that everyone's allowed a second chance, rarely a third chance. So if this becomes an issue again, press the panic button, right? It was, watching that first quarter last week was appalling with how bad the run defense was. And obviously not great losing Marlo Wax, your leader, right? And, Fran said this week that's why he recruited so much depth. You got to have 2 guys to replace any one guy. and that's awesome. And I thought Derek McDonald played a legitimately good football game last week. James Hurd with the interception off the tip drill. Anwar Sparrow is a promising figure.
I've always been an Anwar Sparrow.
Yeah, he always plays with like a fire to him.
He just gets to the ball. I've noticed that ever since he was basically a special teams only guy. Even in the 2022 season when injuries were knocking everybody out. You know, Michael Jones, Marlo X, they were all dealing with things. And Anwar Sparrow was forced into the lineup there. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the strongest guy, but he gets his helmet to the ball. That's all you can ask for.
And that's why you can live with, right? Like, obviously, you hate to lose Marlo Wax, the leader of your defense, but Anwar Sparrow and James Hurd, talented transfer coming out of West Virginia, even though he didn't play a whole lot, like those are two guys that, for depth pieces, like that's a really solid backup option.
And this was like my point going into the season, which I guess I didn't ever really establish on the air, but I am now, is that this Syracuse team is obviously so much more talented than it has in recent years that it can literally afford to have an injury because of the depth. Mm-hmm. You know, they have offensive line depth, they have linebacker depth, they have secondary depth, they have wide receiver depth. You know, Justice Ross Simmons is probably not going to play tomorrow, and nobody's talking about that. You know, last year, Damian Alford, Umari Hatcher, and Donovan Brown were your top 3 leading receivers.
Ugh.
Exactly. That's the sound effect. And I love Alford. I've been an Alford guy since day one. But, I mean, he had 600 receiving yards last year, number 1 on the team. Nobody's missing him right now, as much as I hate to say it, right? There's all these different options across the team. So that's why, an Anwar Sparrow, this could be the perfect game for him. And, we all know that the Derek McDonald, Georgia ties. Tyler Aiken will have a story about that tomorrow in our pregame show. There's a lot of guys who have a chip on their shoulder because guess what? All they've been hearing this week is how good this Georgia Tech running offense is.
Oh, yeah. I think that also it's apples to oranges when you compare an Ohio rushing attack to a Georgia Tech rushing attack, just in my eyes at least. You're looking at a 200-something pound running back in Anthony Tyus from Ohio. The leading rusher for Georgia Tech, Jamal Haynes, 5'9", 180. This is more of a shifty guy.
Yes.
And I think Syracuse, their issues was they couldn't tackle.
Yes.
They would get to Anthony Tyus, and they throw themselves at him.
If you're shifty, that makes it harder to tackle.
Yes, but if you're good in pursuit and you have at least like 5 guys in the area, you're going to bring a smaller, shiftier guy down. With Anthony Tyus, he was just a wrecking ball out there. Shoulder down. He was pushing the pile 8 yards on first down, on second down. Ohio only went to third and fourth down in that first quarter 6 times because they were getting the job done, running downhill on first and second down. Georgia Tech, they have a dual threat with Haynes King, also a very good rushing quarterback. But I think Syracuse is more built to defend against shiftier running backs. We'll have to see that tomorrow. Something to keep an eye and ear out.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna. I think shifty or not, they're still gonna struggle because tackling that you actually can coach. But still, once you're in there, in the trenches, the defensive line like Kevin Joby looked like he didn't really, not that he didn't belong out there, but he was getting moved really easily off the ball.
Sure.
And I know he's less of an experienced football player, only started playing in high school, but Kevin Jobity has that athleticism where you'd kind of like him to be, he's an athletic defensive lineman. Reminds me a lot of he's like a less built out Solomon Thomas in a way.
There you go.
So
had to bring up one NFL reference on a sports night with Skylar Wills.
It's a name I definitely know.
Of course. And for he's a Jet, so New York sport fans can rejoice.
Oh, people love this Jets defense this year. My gosh.
Oh my goodness. Well, go ahead.
What I was saying is, I could easily see, especially with like Parker Navarro was not a dual threat.
He was told to be. He was a quote-unquote dual threat quarterback.
Yeah.
Maybe in the MAC, he is.
Okay. Yeah, well, Haynes King was an SEC quarterback at one point, which also is another tie to this, right? Elijah Robinson coached him in College Station. But when you add that dual threat option where now you're worried about Haynes. Oh, now we have to worry about the other Haynes. So now you've got both guys to worry about. Discipline plays a role in it. Penalties were a factor last week under Fran Brown, which were also a thing under Dino Babers more than anything. So how do they handle not only the shiftiness of Jamal Haynes, but also you got a quarterback to contend with? I don't see it changing at all.
There's a lot, and this has kind of been my whole point this week when thinking about this game. There seems to be this bigger narrative that there's a bigger likelihood that stuff can go wrong for Syracuse rather than stuff can go right for Syracuse. Georgia Tech also has to defend the orange. And now I will say to your point earlier, Jish, am I concerned about the scenario where Georgia Tech has the ball because they have a good ground game and they eat up possession? Yes. And they take away the crowd. And the whole blue out thing with the blue seats will be interesting to see. I'll have takes on that tomorrow in the double overtime. But they also have to defend Kyle McCord. And the Quinn Allen, like you said, Skyler and A-Block, is legit. He is a real dude, okay? All this Jamal Haynes talk, and he's an electrifying player.
No, he's not better than
Quinn Allen is better.
Yeah.
And all I've heard this week is about how Jamal Haynes is this and that. And he's really good. 7.5 yards per pop in the Georgia Tech win over Syracuse last year in Atlanta. He's a really good player. But Quinn Allen is better. And Syracuse still, again, Ronde Gadsden, I think he was awesome.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
There's
Also,
all these playmakers, and Tech has some guys, they have a gadget, they have some gadget receivers, but nothing special.
No, and that's what I'm saying. That's why I said in one of my 2 truths and lies, this team goes as far as the offense can take it, because the defense, we keep talking about it, right? They were anything but special last week against Ohio, but the offense was so good that it made up for it, which sounds weird because we're so used to the last few years.
Yeah.
This Syracuse defense having to do all the heavy lifting. The offense could barely handle.
And then the defense would crumble when they played actual teams.
So it sounds like the winner of this game is going to be which offense is better. Do you agree at home? Please call and let us know. 315-443-2011 or text us 315-556-3929. I think that both Georgia Tech's defense last year, this is something we also have to consider. It's a lot better this year, but last year, when they got into the droves of ACC play, plummeted because they couldn't really stop the run. They didn't really add too many pieces this offseason that makes it may believe, okay, this is going to be a team that now is really good at stopping offenses because they were a bottom 5 unit in the country last year. And Syracuse right now, with its pro-style offense, with its pro-style quarterback, you guys both have a great point. How is Georgia Tech going to stop Syracuse? And it also kind of begs the question, right? Because people look at this matchup on paper, Georgia Tech ranked 23, Syracuse unranked. Would this really be an upset if Syracuse does, in fact, pull off Georgia Tech? I think that these two teams are a lot closer than people like to admit. They don't play the same way, per se. I think Georgia Tech does a good job playing keep away. That's how they beat Florida State. Syracuse takes advantage of maybe shorter possessions. I don't think it would be this tremendous upset. This is no field rushing situation if Syracuse beats Georgia Tech tomorrow.
Correct. I'm right there with you, Jish. And even under Dino, at least in the time I was here, Syracuse plays well at home, except for when they play the big boys, right? Clemson and Florida State.
Georgia Tech is not a big boy.
Right. Syracuse kind of they win these games. Syracuse wins these kind of games. And yeah, the betting lines have them as an underdog, and it's a fair line because the public sees the number 23 next to Georgia Tech's name and that they beat then number 10 Florida State, even though they suck. And it's okay, wow, they should be favored. But you're right. I've always, in the offseason, I always kind of thought of this as a win for the Orange, and maybe I was getting ahead of myself, prisoner of the moment, all the hype, this and that. There's no reason why Syracuse should not win this game. I don't care what the spread says. This is a very talented football team, despite not having Marlo Wax, despite not having Justice Ross Simmons, most likely. It's a really good team on both sides of the ball. Sure, the defense can be better, and I think they will be better. This will be a good test for them. If they fail, then it's a big cause for concern. But you have Kyle McCord. These are the games why you get a real quarterback. And I love Garrett Schrader, but McCord's a real college quarterback, and he's got an arm, and you showed that. And he showed that week one.
He's a real quarterback. He can actually throw the ball.
Yes,
it's a pretty big piece of evidence that Garrett Schrader currently doesn't have a job playing football right now.
Last November, Dan Villari was the emergency quarterback. He went 14 for 59 yards. This is an entirely different offense that Georgia Tech has to game plan for.
Well, it's another Big Ten transfer quarterback there in Kyle McCord, but that's the thing, right?
That's crazy.
He was
sure, a quarterback.
That's crazy.
I mean, it is true. But Kyle McCord, obviously, not to go back in time to our previous conversation about Kyle McCord, right? It's obvious the difference between him and Garrett Schrader, what he can do, how he elevates this offense. But I think I'm with you. I was really wrestling with whether it was an upset or not. And I think the easy answer is yes, because Georgia Tech is ranked. But you look at it right now, it depends how the season goes, but that Florida State victory could look like it meant nothing, right? That team could end up being a bottom of the barrel in the ACC, which means that Week 1 win means was less impressive, but also, right, like on paper, these teams are really similar. I think that a Syracuse offense has the potential to be more explosive than Georgia Tech, something that this Yellow Jacket team, I don't know if they're ready for, right? Like they didn't face two explosive offenses. That Florida State offense is not, they haven't seen a quarterback like Kyle McCord. DJ Uiagalelei is
washed.
Oh.
Maybe he was never.
That's
a nice thing to say. That's a nice thing to say.
Is washed a good term if we never really saw like the full potential
People
of
keep
DJ?
coming back. I mean, that one Notre Dame game. Oof.
Oh man, from what, like 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's funny how Caleb
wow.
Williams' his one bad game was at Notre Dame. It's just funny how this stuff forms. One game doesn't really mean too much.
It's just Notre Dame. There's all eyes on Notre Dame, no matter what you do there.
Yeah, it's crazy.
My point being is that I don't think it is an upset because, first time ranked since 2015, just because the number's there doesn't necessarily mean it's an upset. Syracuse has all the pieces, all the tools to beat Georgia Tech. Another question, though, is so does Syracuse become ranked after this victory?
Wow. Good question. Well, obviously it matters. Well, they have to win. And how convincing would that win be? I'm going to lean that they won't be ranked, and that's fine. Because I'm more concerned about where they stack up in the ACC, and a thought I had earlier today was, like, this game means a lot for ACC standings, right? You got to be top 2 to play in Charlotte December 7th, and the winner of that game gets the 3 or the 4 seed for the tournament.
I'm going to agree with Austin. Except I'm going to be a little more definitive. Syracuse is not getting ranked at all if they win this game. It would have to be so definitive. They'd have to blow Georgia Tech out to even sniff the rankings. They only got 1 vote this week in the coaches poll. No attention from the national media.
And rightfully so.
Of course. But you look at a team like Boston College, who just grounded and pounded and dominated a team like Florida State, a top 10 team at the time. They got votes, but they still aren't ranked either. So, I mean, it really, you would have to blow them out and show no shadow of a doubt to really flush out all the issues we saw from the Ohio game.
And guess what? I'm fine if Syracuse is not ranked. I know we're kind of getting into this hypothetical world, assuming a win here, even though I feel like all 3 of us are kind of on board the Syracuse is going to win train. Keep the orange, down there. You don't want this team to get big heads. New coach, whole new team, new look dome. You don't necessarily want them to have a number next to their name in week 2. You get the bye week. You don't want to rest on your laurels, right? So this team is hungry. Fran Brown is clearly a little bit disrespected by what Brent Key has said this week. That's been, one of these storylines this week. I don't know how much it actually matters, but, this team has a very favorable schedule the rest of September if they could just win tomorrow. And I have a lot of faith in the Orange tomorrow.
Real quick, before we wrap up our time here, Austin, are there any players on either side that we aren't really talking about that you think deserve a closer look?
I think the name Malik Rutherford is worth a mention here. He's a wide receiver, I believe, number 8 for the Yellow Jackets. He was really good last week, 7 catches, 131 yards, his first touchdown. Now, context matters. That one touchdown was a busted play. Again, Georgia State, not necessarily the best defensive team in the world. But, watching some of his highlights kind of made me think about what Coleman Owen did to the Orange last week.
10 catches.
A guy who transferred from, Northern Arizona or some FCS school like that and kind of lit up the Orange quietly. That's low-key the more concerning part about last week, the fact that Coleman Owen was getting open more so than Anthony Tyus was running wild. But that's a whole different thing. So Malik Rutherford, worth a shout-out. I think he's more of a gadget guy than a real guy.
And that's the thing, yards after catch, right?
Yeah.
66 yards against Florida State, 56 of them were after the catch. 131 yards against Georgia State, 87 of them after the catch. So he is dangerous with the ball in his hands, not just, he, like Austin was just about to say, he's gimmicky, can kind of make plays with his legs, and for a team that showed an inability to tackle, that could be a problem.
Yeah, and then quickly, I'll just say Jackson Meeks. I thought he had a couple really nice 50-50 catches last week.
Well, number 8, both sides, Georgia wide receivers. Austin, I'm sure you'll keep an eye out for them in the Dome tomorrow. You can hear Austin again on the double overtime after tomorrow's game between Syracuse and Georgia Tech. We're up against another break, though, but when we come back, we're talking all things Syracuse sports all around the hill. Stay with us here on WAER. Jish Sokolsky, Skylar Wilkes, and Austin Barrick.
Every business owner
Welcome back to SportsNite here on WAER alongside Jish Sokolsky. I'm Skylar Wilkes. Thanks so much for joining us here on from 8 to 9 here on WAER. Call in 315-443-2011 or text us 315-556-3929. If you want to watch us as well on YouTube, the first ever WAER Sports Talk live stream at WAER Sports Talk on YouTube. And along with the live stream, which is new, we're trying something else new here on Sports Night and Around the Hill segment, which includes our engineer Shrikar Rajendran. We're going around the hill talking about a variety of Syracuse sports, not just the football team.
Next up,
we start on the pitch, where number 20 men's soccer is in the midst of its ACC opener at Boston College. The Orange and Eagles are deadlocked at 1 in the 76th minute. SU in search of its first victory at BC since 1999. SU dropped from number 7 to number 20 in the rankings on Tuesday after falling to Lemoyne 1-0 on Monday. Now, did that loss change your opinion of the potential of this team?
Rich, you had a vigorous head shaking.
How could it not? Are you kidding me? You have to win these non-cons, especially if you're playing in a conference like the ACC, where it seems like the national championship spawns out of this conference every single year. Clemson, Notre Dame, Syracuse. You have to beat a team like Lemoyne, who just recently jumped to D1. How are you supposed to unseat a powerhouse like Clemson if you're not winning in a game where Lemoyne got a Mickey Mouse penalty, if you will, to go ahead 1-0? They outshot Lemoyne 28-5 in that game, and they couldn't connect at all. That's really concerning, Skylar.
I mean, Jish, you said it. That was as bad a loss, really, as you could have. This is a team that really has all the talent to Nicholas Kaluki, and probably one of the top players in the ACC. Lemoyne, new to Division I. Also, making it a Salt City derby, that's even more important. You got to win those
you
inner
give it
city
a name,
matchups.
you got to win.
Exactly. And then that shot discrepancy. 28 shots, no goals to show for it. Ian McIntyre is a great coach. He led this team to a national championship, but in such a competitive conference like the ACC, I mean, it is a real concern. And now, Chestnut Hill has not been kind. Syracuse, a bounce-back win here would be huge, but it's going to be probably an uphill battle in the Atlantic Coast to try to get back on top there.
They struck really early in this game, too. They had their first goal under a minute in. Are you kidding me? Like, that's a good start, but now you got to put a second one. There's only 10 minutes left in this game. You can really start turning some heads back around towards the 3-1-5 if you come out with your first win since 1999, but everybody's going to remember that Lemoyne game.
Yeah, it's hard to forget. Now we've got some more sports to talk about. Shrikar, what's up next?
Next up,
on the pitch, over on the turf, number 10 Syracuse meets number 14 Ohio State for the first time since 2014 on Sunday. Field hockey, how important are these early ranked season matchups for Lynn Farquhar and her squad?
Well, it's just as important, right, that the ACC for field hockey is almost as good as it gets. You still got to face North Carolina down the road, the absolute powerhouse. Shout out to field hockey legend Aaron Matson there. This team, a 9-0 dominant win over Lock Haven, where they just got one shot, or did not get a shot the entire game, and that's pretty dominant. Then you win at Penn State on the road. So it's important because it's very similar to your regular season schedule. I mean, almost the entire conference is ranked every year. So you got to deal with it time in and time out. And these out-of-conference, the Big Ten is next best for field hockey. You take care of Penn State. If you can get it done in your home opener against Ohio State, should be a sign of good things to come for Lynn Farquhar and company.
Right. It's really great to beat these ranked teams 100%, but it also helps out Syracuse figure who's going to carry the torch now that Charlotte DeVries and Evka von de Nieuwenhof are no longer on the team. They were the leading scorers from the past few seasons. So there's some new faces leading the charge for Syracuse. These early games, a 9-0 win. I don't care who you are at the Division I level. That's really impressive stuff from Syracuse. They're starting to show who's going to pick up the slack for where those captains left off last year.
And it's good to see that Willemijn Bogert, who's been here the entire time, played with DeVries, played with von de Nieuwenhof. She's now the team leader in points. So Lynn Farquhar, with some newcomers, Bo Von Keppen as well. But Syracuse, I expect them to be competitive in that ACC again. They're always one of the top teams in the country. But another team that may be a surprise. Shrikar, tell us more.
Next up.
On the pitch, Syracuse women's soccer earned a 1-0 victory over Binghamton last night. Midfielder Ashley Roche tallied her team-leading third goal of the season in the 31st minute. Now, fellas, this is our last one of the night. The Orange are 5-1-1, with Shea Vanderbosch recording her third clean sheet of the season. SU was supposed to finish last in the ACC, but how far can Vanderbosch push them?
Not far. Not far at all, actually. And that's not against Shea Vanderbosch whatsoever, don't get me wrong. Syracuse has 3 conference wins in the past 6 years, right? It's great. You can beat teams like Northwestern, probably their most impressive win of the season. You can beat teams like UMass or Mercyhurst. But once you start playing, again, the ACC, it's a big deal. And Syracuse women's soccer just has not shown it when the page is turned. I really am not getting my hopes up just yet until they start winning those ACC games.
You're absolutely right, Josh. I mean, remember last year, Shea Vanderbosch had, 16 saves against Florida State, who ended up winning the national championship. But, the Orange didn't win that game because despite a phenomenal performance, I mean, she's probably one of the premier goalies in the conference, if not the country. But it's a full team effort. And,
Right.
Delaney Stevens from UNC Greensboro has been a solid transfer addition. But there's only so much Shea Vanderbosch can do. It's great to see Nikki Adams have the success. It's their second most win totals, right? Like, they only had 2 wins last year.
Right.
They haven't had more than 8 wins since 2017. So they've turned things around. But the ACC, we've said it a lot, sound like a broken record, is really as competitive as it comes when it in regards to women's soccer. So it's still going to be an uphill battle.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I think it's very impressive that Syracuse already is up to 5 wins when they couldn't only get 2 last season. The new additions are doing their job. Julia Denning, the transfer from Siena, has been a bright spot on the team. But I really need to see this team do it against your Florida States, your Miamis of the world, before I anoint them. Okay, Shea Vanderbosch is leading the charge for this Syracuse powerhouse team. It doesn't click in my mind right now.
No, I'm totally with you, Jish. But one thing that I think we can agree on is, Syracuse, it would be a solid, monumental win in the Fran Brown era if you get it done tomorrow against Georgia Tech. Game time is at 12. WAER has the call. You can tune in at 11:30 for countdown to kickoff, and then we have you after the game. Double overtime goes until 5 o'clock. That's with Ian Nicholas and AJ Myers. Syracuse and Georgia Tech. Any final thoughts here, Jish?
It's going to be a really good game. Going to be a really good atmosphere. If you can tune in, or if you can go to the game, great. But if not, tune in to WAER. We got an electric call as well.
You think the crowd is going to be larger from this week compared to last week?
Has to be. It's your ACC opener. It's a ranked team. How could you not come out and support the Orange?
Fran Brown, first real test of the year, playing an old foe in Brent Key, who was on the coaching staff when Brown was in college at Western Carolina. Very interesting fact there. I mean, a lot of connections here, right? You have the Haynes King Texas A&M connection, plus with Brent Key and Fran Brown. A lot of invisible strings around the game tomorrow. But that's, again, at 12 with double overtime until 5. Some thank yous to hand out. Our producer, Andrew Del Piana, engineer Shrikar Rajendran, and our 2 desk members, Jonah Weintraub and Griffin Bloomstein, with my partner, Jish Sokolsky. Skylar Wilkes saying so long. Thanks so much for tuning in to SportsNite, and make sure to join us tomorrow for Syracuse and Georgia Tech.